bringing you all the latest Nottoway County high school and Bearcat sports each week.
10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45.
Starring Aaron Sorensen and John Dykstra on the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast.
He ran it back 109 yards. They're not going to keep him off the field.
Coming to you from the campus of Northwest Missouri State University.
Welcome back to another edition of the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast. As always, I'm one of your co-hosts, Aaron Sorensen. I'm here with John Dykstra today. We've got more great Bearcat and Spoofhound athletics to bring to you. We're going to kick it off right away with my athlete of the week this week. It was a big week for Bearcat football. They were on the road at Pitt State. One of the guys who really kind of cemented the win for the Bearcats was Isaiah Strayhorn. He had 11 carries for 147 yards and 1 touchdown. He really got after it right away in the first quarter and really kind of, like John said earlier, John was talking about how Isaiah just kind of really took the crowd out of the game.
Yeah, Isaiah, he came up with 4 carries for 81 yards in that first quarter, had his touchdown in that quarter, and the crowd, which we had hyped, and I had hyped, frankly, all week, thinking, man, we'll go into the jungle, it's going to be a tough environment. They were basically non-existent from the jump because Northwest forced that 3-and-out on the first possession, and then they ran the ball right down their throats. In the first quarter, Northwest had 117 yards rushing as a team and 11 yards passing. So it was an obvious emphasis to just run it at Pitt State, who had the top total defense in the MIAA. I haven't looked at those updated stats, but I'm assuming that might be Northwest now. But they just really took it to the Gorillas on their home turf. And by the end of that game, there were probably more Bearcat fans in the stands than there were Pitt State fans, and that's always fun to see.
Yeah, that sea of green kind of travels with these Bearcats, and it's really fun to watch. But when you're talking about that running game, Isaiah Strayhorn was averaging 13 yards per carry. So I thought that was something that just, not only was he effective, but every time he got the ball, he was moving the ball up the field for the Bearcats.
Yeah, he's that speed guy. I mean, they have a plethora of running backs, and they all kind of do something different. And Isaiah's the speed guy who can get outside and do stuff, and you saw that multiple times. He had a 67-yard run in the first quarter that got them out from their own 3-yard line and got them way down into Pitt State territory and kind of just set the tone for the rest of the game. And he was definitely impressive. And, of course, they rotate him in. He only had the 11 carries because you don't need a single featured back with all the talent they have back there. Brody McMahon got plenty of carries. Raymond Thomas got his. Josh Caldwell obviously got his. They just were able to be a balanced rushing attack with Braden Wright also running as well. So just a really impressive offensive day for the Bearcats.
Yeah, and you talk about the talent spread out, in the backfield for the Bearcats and how not just one guy has to compete. The same thing kind of happens with this whole team. We've talked about Sean Bain a lot. He went for 95 yards against Pitt State, but the really impressive thing for him was he's the 8th Bearcat to reach 3,000 career receiving yards. So just kind of another cool thing for him to kind of etch into his already impressive career.
Well, yeah, Sean was really good. At one point in the first quarter, he came to the sideline and was pretty frank with everybody. He said, "They can't cover me," after Braden just overthrew him on a deep ball, and he was right, because later in the game, he obviously got rolling with that 95 yards that he had receiving. They really couldn't cover any of the Bearcat receivers. Cody Massey had a big day with a big 41-yard catch where he out-jumped a guy on a pretty nifty play, actually. Coach Wright, after the game, called it a dipsy-do play. That was a 41-yard catch that the next play resulted in a Chase White touchdown. So, and LaTroy Harper, too. LaTroy got his first touchdown of his college career, the true freshman out of Hamilton. He had a 13-yard touchdown in that second quarter, so the Bearcats, they were just rolling and firing on all cylinders on Saturday, and it was good to see.
Yeah, it was, and it's one of those games that we've talked about and almost kind of had this elusive feel to the game. Going to Pitt, it's a must-win, and you talk about the jungle, but the Bearcats definitely went in there and showed that they're ready to compete, and with that 31-7 score, the defense had a big hand in that victory as well.
Yeah, Austin Eskew said it after the game, too. He said, everybody's talking about Pitt. They're all talking about themselves and how great they are. And he said it felt nice to have that underdog role. And Austin, that defensive line, made life tough on John Rodriguez, who's been Pittsburgh's quarterback since the dawn of the 21st century, it seems like. But he's a 4-year starter for him, and he did not have a fun day out there. He had only 63 yards passing, and just wasn't able to do much of anything for him. And that was just nice to see from a Bearcat front four, who Rich said after the game he only needed to rush 4 because they were getting pressure, and it allowed him to have more guys in coverage when they needed it. And that defense just looked very good, obviously, out there. And I don't think there's much doubt that they are still one of the elite units in the country, and something that the Bearcats can hang their hats on.
And just one thing that I like to talk about, when you said, Austin, the way he was talking, how the Pitt State and even the team, Pitt State, has talked a lot about themselves and their success. But one of the things about the Bearcats that we've seen for years and years, there's always been a lot of talk surrounding this team. People want to say things, and everybody's taking shots at Northwest, but Northwest stays quiet, and they always have an answer for them on the field.
Yeah, I think that comes down from the coaching staff for sure, and the coaching staffs before, frankly, with Mel and everybody. But they kind of just go out there and they do their business. They weren't going to say too much going into the jungle. I mean, Pittsburg State, I saw got some traction with some Northwest people with a tweet they sent out about how the game's going to be won in the trenches, and they put all these stats up, kind of hyping their guys in the trenches. And I saw a couple Bearcats retweet that afterwards with obviously some sarcasm attached to it, because they just got dominated on both sides of the ball up front, and Northwest really the offensive line was great, and the defensive line was even better to come out and win that game.
And like you said, handling business, one of the most, I think, famous little taglines that I've ever heard Sean Bain say multiple times is, it's a business trip. It's a business trip all the time, and they definitely did handle their business. So I'm sure they enjoy this win, but, even Sunday, today, they're probably back to work. Monday, it's really back to work because they've got a business to handle here at home next week. They've got Nebraska Kearney. That kickoff is at 2 p.m.
Yeah, if fans weren't excited to come out to the homecoming game anyway, I mean, after this performance and kind of seeing that the Bearcats are back on track, I expect a big crowd for homecoming, and show these guys a little love after they went out and, like you said, took care of business in Pittsburgh and really put themselves. They're now tied for first in the MIAA with Pittsburgh. Obviously, they had the tiebreaker if it would come down to that. But Pittsburgh, if you look at their schedule, Northwest was kind of that first real tough game they had this season. So I don't know if Pittsburgh's frankly going to be able to maintain where they are now, but we will see. Right as of now, they are tied for the lead in the MIAA with Northwest, obviously.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like you said, it's just going to be kind of a race to the finish. But with our Bearcats, they're not the only Bearcat team trying to fight for that spot atop of the MIAA. We've seen our volleyball team be there. They currently have moved down to 4th. That came after 4th in the conference. They're actually tied right there with UCO. But saw UCO at home on Friday. Honestly, it was not the way I expected the Bearcats to come out because of last Saturday. They did lose to UNK in 5 sets. They were the number 1 team in the nation at one point. I expected quite a bit of fire coming out of the girls, really, to kick off this UCO game. They seemed a little slow, dropped the first 2 games to UCO, came all the way back, forced a 5th set, ended up falling in the 5th set. And John, you were there for the UNK game in that 5th set, and it's one of those things that I think there's a lot of talent on this team. These 5th sets, we've seen them struggle. What do you think really needs to change as they're heading into essentially kind of the tail end of the season here, and you want to kind of be able to handle those 5th sets as you get into the conference tournament?
I mean, the 5th set is all about, and I'm no volleyball expert by any means, but just by talking to coaches over the years, the 5th set's all about who gets off to that fast start, because it's only to 15. So you just don't want to. There's too much up in the air with the 5th set. If if you're the more talented team, you just never want to push it to that. And I know Coach Worth talked about how they're not scared of that set after the UNK game. But if you're one of the better teams, which I believe they are in the MIAA, you just got to avoid it just to take that element of chance, I guess, out of it. And that came back to the poor start it sounded like they had against UCO, and just not being able to. If you could take one of those first two, then you can end it in 4 and avoid that altogether. But I mean, it's just a learning experience, and I trust that they're kind of in that gauntlet of their schedule now, like you mentioned with UNK and UCO, and Washburn's coming up now. So hopefully it's a good learning experience and they can take some of the momentum on the road, because they'll be there for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's just this team is incredibly talented. And this, obviously Coach Worth has proved her ability to scout athletes. I mean, this is her 7th season, so these girls that we're seeing have all been recruited under her leadership, and she's built up this team. Now it just kind of comes down to where they can settle in, like you said, and beat these teams. In my opinion, the UNK game, they went up 2-0. In my opinion, this is a team that can sweep UNK. UCO game, like we said, they started out slow, but Hallie Sidney came in big again. She had 24 kills and 3 blocks. Maddie Bruder, as always, was very good, 18 kills, 3 blocks. Her percentage was much higher, which was what they were kind of looking for after that UNK game. Saturday, the Bearcats kind of got back into their groove. They went ahead and swept Pitt State 3-0. So kind of just a good momentum builder for them as they head into, like you said, quite a road week as we head into this upcoming weekend. They're going to see Emporia State on Friday, and then on Saturday they'll see Washburn. Washburn's currently the number 1 team in the MIAA. They have not lost, and Washburn is actually the only team in our conference that's beat UNK. So that's going to be a big one. Tuesday they head to Missouri Western, and then again the following weekend they're going to see UCM. And UCM is also ranked nationally in the top 25. So they're really in a big tough spot with their schedule. Top 4 teams get a site at home for the conference tournament. So John, how right there they're sitting 3rd and 4th. This is a pretty big road week for them to kind of make sure that they seal that 4 spot to maybe have a game at home. Do you think if they can get that 4 spot that we see a different outcome for them than we've seen in the past few years where they lose first round?
I'm hoping so for sure, but I think it's important to note there that, I mean, we were talking the same thing with football 2 weeks ago. It's a little disappointing week, sure, to lose a couple five set matches, but with that kind of schedule, sure, it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. If you go out and you give Washburn their first loss, all of a sudden that's a statement right there, and then that builds the confidence in the girls, obviously, and hopefully they can continue, or they can find some of that magic that they had before in the season. And they certainly still do. 2 5-set losses aren't a thing to fold up the tent about and go home, but hopefully they can just find that rhythm, and if they get a couple statement wins this week, it could go a long way to getting that top seed. And obviously, if you have that one of those top seeds in the MIAA tournament, that, like you said, makes it a lot easier to get through that first round. And all of a sudden, you win that first game, then you're on a roll, and anything can happen.
Yeah, and like you said, it's just one of those things where you can build a lot of momentum. These 2 5-set losses came from 2 top 4 teams in the MIAA. If they have the opportunity to go out there and play strong, take a win against Washburn, especially with them being where they're at. Take a win against UCM. They finished the season going to UNK, so they get another shot at University of Nebraska Kearney. And I know those girls were very hungry after that loss to get another shot at them. But our volleyball team was not the only other women's team in action. We saw on Sunday the 30th of last week, women's golf was at the Augustana Invite. That's in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And for the first time this season, they finished 3rd out of 10. So that's a good sign for our golf team to kind of etch that into their belt. Women's soccer was at Emporia State on the 30th, and they ended up losing 3-0. Another kind of tough game for them, but like we talk about strength of schedule, our soccer team does play a lot of very talented teams. On Friday, women's soccer was at Nebraska Kearney. They lost 1-0. So it's been a little tough road for them, but like we've said in the past, a new coach still building to kind of build up that culture and build up that success. So it's one of those years where I'm sure it's a learning year. They're going to build up and hope that they can continue to grow with these next few seasons. And today, Sunday, actually, while we're recording, it's the 7th. They get their shot at Fort Hays State. That's at 2:30, barring that we don't have any weather that gets in the way of that, as well as women's golf. They're at the Midwest Fall Classic. That's at Mazingo today, and that did start at 9 a.m. We'll see if that will continue to go. We've had some rain here, so definitely just a big week for all of the Bearcat sports and big things coming up. But let's kind of switch gears here and let's take it over and let's talk a little bit of Spoofhounds.
Yeah, the football team just kind of kept their groove going again this week in a big way with homecoming victory 82-8 over Bishop LeBlond, who Bishop LeBlond's been struggling, so that's not that much of a shock in the score there, and they're also a pass-happy offense, so that made that first half kind of drag along and gave the Spoofhounds a lot of chances to score early, but they were incredibly impressive again in a blowout victory on homecoming. Rushing the ball was really, as they always do, where they made their hay, because they had 3 100-yard rushers, and all 3 had at least 2 touchdowns with some guys we kind of expect. Eli Dallas had 5 carries for 135 yards and 3 touchdowns. Tyler Houchin had 4 carries for 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Aiden Colin, normally a JV guy, comes in later in these blowout wins, but he really had a good game with 4 carries for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they really spread out the ball. As you can tell, nobody had over 5 carries for Maryville. They tried to spread out as much as they could once they got that huge lead on LeBlond, but just an impressive performance by the Spoofhound football team again.
Yeah, and like you said, that's kind of been, if there's any themes to the Spoofhounds, there's been kind of 2 this season. Big wins and success spread all the way throughout the team. And everybody's getting involved. And, like we talked last week, that really helps with building the program, continuing to build the program with getting a lot of guys playing, as well as keeping guys healthy and keeping their legs fresh.
Yeah, they even throwing the ball, they spread it around. Only 4 passes on the day for Ben Walker. He completed 2 of them. They were both touchdowns. A 63-yard touchdown to senior Corbin Cook and a 36-yard touchdown on actually the opening play of the game to Connor White. They're just rolling. They've got a lot of weapons. They've got the toughest part of their regular season schedule, other than that Blair Oaks opener, is coming up with Savannah this week on the road, and then followed by Lafayette the week after. And those are you were putting odds on it, the second and third best teams in the conference. Savannah's undefeated still, so you could say they definitely have a shot to be the number 1 team if they pull out a win this week. But just the way the Spoofhounds are clicking right now, I don't see them losing in the regular season, and they're going to definitely come in focused on a road game in Savannah next week.
So just for the fun of the fans, because the little bit of razzle-dazzle and some flashy plays is what a lot of people like to hear about. And I actually was not at the game on Friday, but I saw the tweet that you tweeted out, John, with the picture of Eli Dallas really doing his thing, and I believe he had multiple defenders and shook them all off and ran the other side. Can you kind of break that play down for us and just his athleticism?
There's not much to break down. As the Royals' former center fielder Gerard Dyson would say, that's what speed do, because he was penned against the sideline with, I don't know, the picture shows it. It's 4 or 5 guys just completely surrounding him, and he just took one big cut and kind of left them all in the dust and sprinted to the other sideline for I think that was a 40-yard touchdown. But as you could tell by his stats, with 5 carries for 130-some yards, he did those kind of moves a lot in that game, and so did Tyler Houchin, who was named homecoming king for those who are keeping track of that. All those guys, Aiden Cullen too, like I said, they all were effective running the ball, and certainly Eli's capable of those wow plays, but they have a lot of talent on that offense, and Coach Webb likes to say that's the point of the wing tee, is to get it to a lot of guys and spread it out, and they've been doing that with tremendous success.
Yeah, and we've talked week after week after week, and how, like you said, they're clicking, they're playing very well, and like you mentioned earlier, we've got some tough competition coming up. So these Spoofhounds, we expect them to keep rolling. We're excited to see them, and like you said, going on the road, we expect them to be pretty focused. And like we mentioned about the Bearcat team, it's just another business trip for the Spoofhounds.
I think the Bearcats had their wake-up call a couple weeks ago, and the Spoofhounds just happened a lot earlier in week 1, and they have been on a mission ever since. And I think they know how good Savannah is this week. They know what Savannah's been, frankly, beating teams by similar scores to what Maryville has. So they know they're no pushover, but I fully expect them to come in super focused. We might see more than 5 carries from Eli or Tyler this week, and because the game might dictate it, but either way, I think they're going to be hard to stop, and I would expect some big performances from those guys.
And it will be yet another exciting week for them. But, man, like you've said before, there is many Spoofhound sports that have been going on, and it's almost hard to keep track of at times. But like you said, there's been a lot of success across the board. So what else did we see this week from Spoofhounds?
Well, that'll bring me to my athlete of the week. I gave it to Morgan Goodrich this week. The Spoofhound senior tennis player. The Spoofhounds won the team districts this week. They came in as the 2 seed. They beat Trenton in a very strange semifinal. The 3-seeded Trenton came to Maryville. They had to play on several courts because of lighting situations and everything. But they made it through that round, and then they played on Wednesday. They went to Savannah to play the district championship match, and were able to rally from falling behind the top seed early. They lost 2 of the 3 doubles matches, but came back and they won 4 of the 5 singles matches that finished, because in districts, when you're playing teams, once you clinch that 5th win, they don't finish out the matches. So they ended up beating them 5-3. Morgan, like I said, was a big reason why in that, because she won her singles match against a very good player from Savannah, and was able to, that really helped propel them to that district title. And then the team just went straight from that to on Saturday they went to individual districts, and Goodrich had a good day again. She ended up finishing 2nd at individual singles, and that clinched her spot in sectionals, which will be played on Monday back at St. Joe again. So just an exciting week for the Spoofhound tennis team.
Yeah, a big week for them, and the ball kind of keeps on rolling. The cross-country boys were in action, and they had some guys finish up pretty high. John, can you kind of take us through what we saw from them?
Yeah, they've had a rocky start to their season, not because of anything they've done, just because they've had a lot of cancellations with all this weather we've been having. But they got to run in Savannah this week against some competition that they will obviously be facing later on with notably the Savages, but a lot of other quality teams there too. And the boys took first in the Savannah Invitational. Garrett Dumpke got 2nd. Zach Kaiser took 5th. Chase Sims took 7th. Kale Sterling took 8th. I mean, so obviously they just flooded the podium there, and it was just a really good result for the boys. And the girls had a good meet too, as both the Feuerbacher sisters, Laura and Amy, each finished in the top 10. So cross country they're starting to get their groove now after those early season cancellations, and it's exciting to see for them.
Yeah, and what a list to have on the top 10 of a cross country finish with so many Spoofhounds. But as we said, one of the teams we've talked about quite a bit this year is the Spoofhound volleyball team, and the way that they've kind of had a season going, and I believe they had some MEC games this week.
Yeah, they played Benton, who beat them earlier this year in straight sets, actually, at the Hound Pound. It was a non-conference game that they played them there. Going into Thursday's game, the Spoofhounds were 4-0 in the MEC, but they had to go to Benton. So you were kind of afraid that could be their first loss. They had other ideas. They dropped the first set and then roared back the second and third to make that MEC record 5-0, which was obviously a really big deal. They've got 2 more MEC games left as they chase that conference title, and they've got Chillicothe coming up this week, and that's a team that's struggling a little bit. They're under 500. If they can manage to get that win, that sets up a colossal matchup next Tuesday, the Tuesday after this week, when they would go to St. Pius, face off another undefeated MEC team. So we'd have a de facto kind of conference championship game down there with St. Pius and the Spoofhound. If they can make that happen, that'll be very exciting, especially considering, like I've said before, this team is a lot of sophomores and young players. So just to have that much success this early is a great sign for things to come from this team.
Yeah, to be undefeated in the MEC when you've got a lot of youth on your team, that's very positive looking ahead for the next couple years for them. Spoofhound softball team has also been in action quite a bit here lately, and I believe districts get underway for them soon.
Yeah, that's kind of the next thing on the schedule. They are set up to begin district play on Wednesday. Last year, as we kind of talked about with the Bearcat volleyball team, they've had trouble getting out of that first round of districts. So they have a huge opportunity on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. They will play Lafayette in the opening round of districts. If they can get through that game, then maybe we can get on a little bit of a roll like we had going earlier in the season and really capitalize on some momentum and see how far they can take this.
And, just kind of keeping the ball rolling, we've actually had one of our Athlete of the Week come from Spoofhound Soccer. A couple weeks ago, we had Thomas DeStefano. How is their season continuing to go?
Well, they picked up a big conference win earlier this week when they beat Benton 6-0. Not super surprising. Spoofhound Soccer is kind of the class of the MEC, along with St. Pius and a couple other teams. Chillicothe is very good as well. But that was a big win, 6-0, like I said. And then they played in the KC Showcase this week. That's a very good test against a lot of bigger schools. Coach Reuter likes to do it early in the season, then he adds this late in the season as, like I said, they're dominating a lot of these MEC teams. So to have a test like that as districts are starting to approach and stuff like that, it's nice. They lost to Carthage 6-1. It's just going to be nice to kind of see that, and maybe like we talked about with Bearcat football and Spoofhound football, just having that kind of game that shows you what you need to work on when maybe some of these other teams aren't making you even go to your second or third options or anything like that. That's always nice at this point. So anyway, a 6-1 loss against Carthage. Now we're just roll it forward into this week as we start to get ready for districts again. And
we kind of keep the ball rolling here yet again. We've got another Spoofhound sport with the golf team.
Yeah, golf. Last week they made it through district. Maybe not the performance they wanted out of districts. They ended up finishing second, but that was played at St. Joe Country Club. A very tough course. Nobody really shot their best, and they still survived to take second. So now they move on to sectionals, and of course they were much more comfortable with Moelia Country Club, and they will play that on Monday when you're listening to this podcast. So hopefully by the time you finish listening, we'll already have a story up on MaryvilleDailyForum.com. They should be favored to make it out of sectionals, and then they get to play on the ultimate course they're most comfortable with for state with Mazingo on next Monday and Tuesday. So as long as we don't have any major hiccups, and tomorrow at Moelia should be an exciting week for Spoofhound golf going into this next week, and an opportunity to go watch some state-level competition just just right outside of town here at Mazingo.
Yeah, and like you said, there's just so much going on right now in the Spoofhounds. All of the Spoofhound teams have been quite successful this year. As we always mention, you can follow them and their stories on the MaryvilleDailyForum.com, and each week we'll bring updates of how those games and competitions finish, as well as what's coming up. This week we have another special guest on the Maryville Forum podcast. Who better than head coach Rich Wright of the Bearcat football team? So we're going to kind of kick it right off and have him kind of break down what we saw during that Pitt State game. Hi, Coach. Thanks for being with us here today. I just kind of want to go in right away and kind of talk about something that's been surrounding this team for quite a while, and just the culture and the mentality that you have built that's kind of trickled down through this team. And we've seen some adversity this year, and with all the hype that was leading up to this Pitt State game and going into the jungle, as they say, can you kind of talk about the mentality that you and all the guys kind of share to go in there and quiet the crowd, as we talked about, and kind of do the business trip and get things done?
You know, what we really tried to stress all week is anytime you play against, in those big game situations, you almost go reverse psychology a little bit, because everybody in town is talking the game up. Everybody on the message boards is talking the game up. We really try and focus it as, hey guys, it's a game. That game can't win us a conference championship. That game can't win us a national championship, and it can't get us in the playoffs. So it's got no more or no less value than any other game on our schedule. It's important, but we don't need to focus on the outcome. We've got to focus on the process. And so what we really tried to hammer into their heads all week was winning each snap. And I gave them the buzzword that you're only promised 3 downs every possession you get, whether you're on offense or you're on defense. And we got to focus on making plays on each of those 3 downs. And if it moves the chains, then we're successful, and we reset ourselves and play another 3 downs. And by compartmentalizing the approach, it kind of takes away from the distractions and the bigger picture piece. And I think that's a reason why we've been able to have success over the years, is we don't focus on the outcomes. We focus on what we're doing within that's going to create the outcome that we want.
Yeah, and on Saturday you did that with a fast start, and everybody talked about that after the game, how important it was to kind of take that crowd out, which I know you prepared for all week, the loud crowd, but you were able to take them out of the game right away by scoring fast, getting the 3 and out on defense first, and then basically running the ball straight down the field with Isaiah Strayhorn and others. Just how big was that to have that fast start in the jungle?
It was absolutely critical. You always want to, if you start playing well, it creates momentum for you and takes momentum away from the opposing team. And when you're in an environment like that, if you can punch somebody in the nose right off the jump, like the way that we're able to, it's great. We go out on defense, we get a 3 and out, the offense takes the ball down the field and scores. So that just kind of sets the table for the rest of the day and forces them to play catch up. Particularly with how Pitt is built offensively, they're not a team that's going to be able to score a ton of points, and with the defense that we feel like we have, that does a lot for the confidence of those kids on that side of the ball when we can get a lead early. And so it was critical for a young football team, I think, to start fast in that game.
And that kind of brings us into the defense, though, like you talked about there. The defensive line, you mentioned to us after the game that you only had to rush 4 a lot of the game because those guys were just able to get pressure, and obviously that's your forte there with the D-line. So how happy were you with the way those guys were able to perform, and what was kind of their key to success this week and really having a big game?
Those kids have practiced their tails off. We were behind where we've been over the last few years to start the season, and I don't mince words with those guys, and I told them that. I told them there was talent, but it wasn't where it needed to be, by Northwest standards. And those kids have come in and they've really bought in and worked their tails off. They've worked very, very hard. There's been a lot of improvement here on the defensive line from the day we arrived here in fall camp to now. They're starting to understand the mentality and how hard they have to play every snap. They're becoming more relentless. They're doing a good job of getting off the football. And I know that sounds very cliche, but there's a lot of defensive linemen that have a way they play the run and way they play the pass, and you can't do that and be effective in today's football with the RPOs and the things like that, because everything looks like run early. And so if you stop your feet, you get caught in trouble. And our guys did a good job of controlling the line of scrimmage. If we can control the line of scrimmage with 4, if we can get pressure on the quarterback with 4, it allows me to help, in the passing game and help the back end so they don't get caught up in so many one-on-one matchups. And the last 2 weeks, that's kind of where we've taken ourselves back to, and the D-line's responded in that.
At the back end, I know you switched it up last week and moved Anthony back there to safety. Did you just kind of continue to see that growth with the DBs and getting Anderson back to a corner, obviously? And are you just liking the way that kind of new look group fit together on Saturday?
I really am. I feel like those guys have played pretty well the last 2 weeks. Jaravian coming back has been big for us because, he was supposed to be a starter this year. And, he pulled his hamstring in camp, and, we missed him. He played about 4 or 5 snaps in the Washburn game was all, and re-aggravated his hamstring again. So until last week against Emporia State, we were down, basically two starting defensive backs from our first football game, with the injury to Gassman for the season. So I just wasn't happy with the way that group was clicking, and so visited with Coach Clayton and decided to make a change. Felt like we're going to try and get more athletic at safety, and Anthony definitely does that from a coverage standpoint. His coverage skills are really good, and we get a lot of play. A lot of offensive people are in the slot. A lot of the most explosive offensive people in the league, and so to put our best cover guy, be able to move him to the inside kind of helps. The other guy that's helped us tremendously is Shama Pierre. Shama's been playing well. He moved over to the other corner, and so by getting Jaravian and Shama playing well and getting Anthony at safety, it's really kind of helped us. And then the guy that's gelled the whole thing together is Jack Richards, because he's basically the quarterback of the defense.
Quarterback of the offense is Braden Wright, obviously, and Braden had another good game. The play that stuck out to me, and the play I actually ended up writing a little bit about in my story this week, was that big run by Isaiah early, 67 yards, I believe, and his lead blocker all the way down the furthest down the field on that play was actually Braden out there. Is that kind of example of why the team follows him the way they do, and they've embraced the freshman quarterback and really supported him early in the season because of plays like that with, like I said, him running all the way down the field to try to get a block?
Yeah, I think it does help because the kid is a competitor and he wants to win, and anytime you can show your teammates that, I think it's important. He doesn't really care about his stats. He's not, concerned in how many times he's throwing the ball or how many times he's running with the football. He just wants to win. And so, running downfield and trying to make a block for a teammate is just kind of indicative of that mentality. And so Braden's done a great job for us. He's still young and he still makes some mistakes, but you can see the growth and maturation as the season's progressing, and that's fun.
And you've had that timeshare at running back so far this year, which I know is a good thing, obviously, because none of those guys wear themselves out or anything like that. But Isaiah had a huge game, over 80 yards in the first quarter against Pitt, obviously. I know he's kind of that explosive guy for your offense. Just what have you seen from him as he his first year in the program here kind of continues to learn the scheme and everything with that? Have you just seen that growth week by week for him?
Yeah, and Isaiah is a little bit more of a rep guy. He's got to see it a little bit more. It's not just put it on the board for him to get it conceptually. So having the reps has been big for him. We all kind of felt like as the season would go on, he would continue to get better because his understanding of the offense, just the nuances of how to run behind the offensive line would improve. And he broke out Saturday, obviously. He's a talented kid. He's got great vision, good feet, low center of gravity. And the thing that's nice about our offense right now each of our backs are a little bit different. Now Raymond is a little bit more like Isaiah, but they're each unique in a way, and it's not easy for defenses to prepare for different styles like that. And so, what you're trying to give, what you're trying to allow, you're always going to give something up. So what is it? And so it makes that more challenging when you have different styles of running backs. And Isaiah did a great job on Saturday.
And you've got some of your receivers kind of got into the flow. I talked to Sean Bain after the game, and he just talked about the young guys in that receiver room with him and how they're developing. Cody Massey's not necessarily a young guy, but he made a big impact with obviously a great catch on that dipsy-do play that you described on Saturday. But you had LaTroy got his first touchdown, and some guys like that. Chase White's just a touchdown machine. It seems like every time he catches the ball, it's for a touchdown. But just what have you seen from that group kind of developing around guys you knew you had going into the year with guys like Bain and Alec Tatum and those guys? And obviously Jamie Taylor's had some big games too.
Yeah, it's been fun because the young guys are starting to figure out their role and their identities, and it's I think I've mentioned this to you before. When we're in our most dangerous is when you can't focus on one person within our offense, and that's what makes this offense go. Is that it's never been designed to showcase one individual. It's been designed to pretty much take what the defense gives you, and so you have the ability to make plays from any of the skill positions. And these young guys that are learning, guys like LaTroy Harper, scoring his first touchdown on Saturday. Dante Keys had a heck of a football game, maybe not in the stat line, but he threw a couple of great blocks. He really did create some explosive plays, off of this blocking. And so, they're learning, they're growing, they're doing the little things that you need to be successful as a program. And I think it bodes well for us moving forward.
And another thing Sean talked about after was, I think he called it a wake-up call, or I forget exactly how he phrased it, but he was talking about the UCO game and how they've kind of realized as a team that you can't take anything for granted, every snap and everything that goes along with that. Have you kind of seen that from the guys after that? You can kind of preach it as a coaching staff all you really want, but for them to see it on the field and now to tell the difference just between this road trip this weekend and 2 weeks ago at Edmond, just what have you seen from the team kind of embracing that every snap mentality type thing?
Well, it's really started. It's started in the preparation. That's the piece that you preach and preach as a coach, but they finally got that. That oftentimes in college football you get what you deserve in terms of practice and your preparation, and if you don't prepare well, it's difficult to perform well. And we just had an okay week of practice that week. Since that loss, we've come back, and our level of focus, our level of intensity, our attitude and our effort has been exponentially better on the practice field. And what they've seen now as a result for the last 2 weeks is, obviously a better performance on Saturday. And sometimes I said this privately to a lot of people, but if you lose to Pitt or you lose to Hayes, you lose a game like that, the perception is that's an upper echelon team. And this is no discredit to Central Oklahoma, but, there's no one that's confusing them with an upper echelon team in the MIAA right now. And so to lose that game was really an eye opener for everybody, player-wise in our football program. We talk all the time that if you don't bring your A game, you get beat every week, and it happened. Our program had never lost to Central Oklahoma. So you hear the noise, but sometimes you don't. You hear the message, but you don't really understand the message. And after we got beat, the message came through loud and clear, and our kids have since responded.
And then to wrap it up, you've got homecoming week this week. You've got Kearney coming in. They're similar in some ways, at least offensively, to what Pitt presented with that run-heavy look and with their option game, obviously. What are you looking for this week from them, and is it nice to have Pitt last week to kind of prepare for that red-heavy option? It's a different type of option, but still option football.
I think it gets you set mentally more than anything else. They're going to be different, like you said, than Pitt. We may we're going to play a little bit differently. I haven't really sat down and put together a game plan yet, but I suspect that we're going to do some things differently than what we did against Pitt, just because of how Carney plays their option stuff. But the physical mentality piece is there. They're big and physical on both sides of the ball, so we're going to have to be as well. We talk about it every year. Homecoming is a big distraction because it's such a big deal here at Northwest, and there's so much going on all week long, and we just try and preach to them to block out the noise, and we've got one job. That's to win a football game. And so that'll be the message all week long. We don't need to judge any floats, and we don't need to pick any homecoming queens. We have one job, and that's to win a football game. And so that's where our attention and our focus needs to be.
Sounds good, Coach, and I'm sure everybody will be excited to come out and watch that homecoming game even more than they already were with the coming off the big win on Saturday. But thanks for joining us, Coach.
You bet. You guys have a great day, okay?
Thank you. So as always, this has been another edition of the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast. I'm your co-host, Aaron Sorensen, here with John Dykstra. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to more great sports.
Bringing you all the latest Nottoway County high school and Bearcat sports each week.
10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45.
Starring Aaron Sorensen and John Dykstra on the Maryville Forum Sports Podcast.
He ran it back 109 yards. They're not going to keep him off the field.
Coming to you from the campus of Northwest Missouri State University.